Hey everyone, and welcome back to Semi Stories. Today we got another crazy story from r/EntitledParents, where OP's mother-in-law tries to stop his wife's life-saving treatments. Allow me to introduce you to my late mother-in-law. I'll call her Carol, for the sake of variety. Though I've heard many stories about her, for the most part I'll stick with things that I witnessed myself. There are enough of them. I don't think Carol ever met a New Age concept that she didn't like. Her expressed goal was to synthesize all religion, science, and mysticism into a unified whole. All of it. To this end, she amassed a large collection of books and stranger objects from her travels, with an especial focus on healing. Now, her library had volumes about vibration manipulation, curative trampolining, homeopathic color therapy, and on and on. I am not joking or exaggerating here. Her shelves had lots of admittedly pretty mineral crystals, along with bottles of magic goddess essence, evaporated away, and bogus radon protectors powered by diagrams of geometric figures. Her clearly favorite book, based on the number of annotations and sticky notes, was hundreds of pages of word salad of spiritual beings from the star Arcturus. That's Arcturus, spelled with an H because of the h-bar Planck's constant from physics. Except that Planck's constant is denoted by h, and h-bar is the reduced Planck's constant. It's important to get the details right when you're dealing with spiritual beings, you know? Her pentagonal home was custom built around an energy vortex that she discovered in the coastal peaks of British Columbia. Carol's parenting was, how should I put this, more darkly eccentric. She was physically and emotionally abusive to her children. One still has some pencil lead embedded in his hand from when she stabbed him because she wasn't satisfied with his piano practice. She attacked one with a kitchen knife. She started slut-shaming her daughter, later my wife, as soon as she grew breasts, for growing breasts, so she forced her daughter to wear two large bathing suits, with the apparent intention of making said breasts look smaller by contrast, but with the actual effect that there were wardrobe malfunctions. She was ashamed that her daughter went into medicine and became a noted specialist, rather than support her own non-traditional medical work. My wife got the hell out at 17 and moved across the country to go to university. For most of the time after that, she went relatively low contact. A decade ago, my wife suffered from a surgical error which resulted in abdominal sepsis and asked me to call her mother. That made me understand just how deathly serious the situation was. I was to call in the family for what might be the last time. I hadn't grasped that her life was truly at risk until that point. Nothing less would have induced her to get her mother to visit. To her credit, Carol hurried out, for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks. It was expected that in that time my wife would be either dead or on the road to recovery. Carol stayed in our home, and at first things didn't go too badly. For the most part, we just didn't talk about the treatments that my wife was undergoing. Carol did express concerns about the antibiotics that were given, since according to her views, antibiotics did nothing but harm. But a couple of weeks stretched out to a couple of months, and Carol became harder to live with. She was angry when I stroked my wife's hair with my hand because I was blocking the energy from her chakra. She started blaming me for having somehow caused the nausea that the botched surgery was supposed to cure. I drove her out to pick up a magical concoction of essential oils on the condition that she check with one of the doctors before applying them. I pointed out that if the mixture had the power to heal, then it also had the power to cause harm, which Carol denied. When we got back to the hospital, I nabbed one of the residents when we reached my wife's floor to ask about that. Carol became furious about that, and it was clear that she had no intention of talking to the doctors. At home, she became more abusive to me. She was claiming that I was abusing my wife by not letting her have things in the house. At that point, I lost my temper. For the first time, I'd yelled at a person in literally a couple of decades. I told her that almost everything in sight was actually her daughter's, displacing my stuff, the sofas, the piano, tables and chairs, bookshelves, the electronics, the shelves for the CDs and DVDs were mine, but half the contents were hers. Carol then wanted to know if I'd be continuing the herbal remedies after she left, and I told her that that was up to my wife. I'd continue them if she wanted. I'd stop if she preferred. Carol screamed that I was abusing my wife by following her own wishes rather than her mother's. On the night before Carol was supposed to be heading out, I was restless. That particular nightmare was about to end, but my wife was still quite ill. I got to thinking about that essential oil mixture, which included both oil of cloves and oil of cinnamon. Those are both strongly irritating if left on the skin, and Carol had been painting my wife's feet with the stuff. Her feet were, apparently, the correct energy points to draw out the infection. I went online and found the manufacturer's instructions, which specified that the oil needed to be significantly diluted with some neutral oil if it was going to be applied to skin. Carol hadn't even been using the stuff properly. Well, that explained why the skin on my wife's feet was yellow and starting to peel, but Carol was furious when I calmly pointed out the problems that she was creating out of ignorance. A few days after Carol left, my wife took a turn for the worst and had to go back into the intensive care unit, and I dreaded the phone call that I had to make. Not because of the bad news, but because I anticipated how Carol would react, and she didn't disappoint. If you really loved her, you'd put her back on the herbal oil and stop the antibiotics. You know perfectly well they don't do a damn lick of good. At which point I hung up. I had other things to worry about. My wife pulled through. After months in the hospital and 3 stays in the ICU, she's still in poor health. I told her that I was putting my foot down. Under no circumstances was her mother welcome under my roof again. She had grossly abused her privileges as a house guest, and I didn't care about the family custom that family members were always welcome to stay as guests. I would not stay under the same roof as her mother. Having heard my stories and based on her own experiences, my wife agreed. A few years ago, Carol died, much as she had lived. She was diagnosed with metastasized lung cancer. Although she did undergo some real medical therapies, she relied mostly on her quack remedies, pawpaw twig powder, whey protein immune boosters, and the like. The usual stuff that ethics-free swindlers spawn off on desperate sufferers. She firmly believed that all the little white spots on her lung x-rays were a good sign, and that her rapid weight loss indicated that her boosters were draining the cancer away. If there's some existence after death, I hope she came to appreciate all of the harm she did in life. Except a couple of nights after she passed, I was driving from the hospital back to the Energy Vortex house. The rental car's navigation device suggested a shorter route than I had taken to get there, but that route turned into a back road, into a rough road in the hills, onto a track in the forest, and in pitch darkness apart from my headlights over a rocky bump and directly into a tree trunk. Luckily, I was traveling slowly and stopped in time. As I paused, shaken, I got to wondering if there might be something to Carol's worldview after all, and if her vengeful spirit might have possessed the GPS device, making one last try at killing me. Holy hell, what a horrid person. Now, there is nothing wrong with believing in the mystical or in potions, but you have to stay a little bit grounded and do the actual research before claiming its significance. Sometimes believing in strange remedies or signs might advance science like it did back in the olden days. However, and that is a however in all caps, this woman was a horrible and abusive person nonetheless. You might believe in your ideas and mystics, but I don't think you can force anyone to believe with you. Hurting your kids emotionally and spiritually showed me that she lives in delusion, especially considering she was mad at her daughter for maturing like a normal human being. I am glad that everything ended up being alright for OP, however. It can't have been easy trying to help his wife overcome all that trauma from her past, only to be hit with such a terrible sickness and being forced to invite that woman back into her life. Now, after saying that, I hope she doesn't haunt my channel next. Perhaps you guys could banish her with positive vibes by clicking the subscribe and like button. Anyways, that's it for me. I hope you guys all enjoyed the story, and I'll be back in the next one. See ya!